All righty. I'm still rolling in. I don't know if I should start. All right, let me introduce our special guest lecturer, Alistair Thompson, a former chief financial officer, CFO, who's written 2 books that I recommend every small business or medium-sized business purchase. The first is Cash Flow Surge, 101 no cost and low cost fast action strategies to boost your cash flow, and how to build a better business plan, a hands-on action guide for owners. In all my years working with small businesses, these are 2 of the biggest problems I find. 1, they don't have any cash to run marketing programs. Or 2, they don't have any business plans. They never bothered. You talk about marketing plans, I mean, even worse than that. You know, and then as Alistair and I were talking, that's not plans to raise funds. Business plans are necessary to plan how your business is going to succeed. And Alistair's book does a fantastic job of teaching you what's involved. Now, I met him on marketing Twitter. Oh, hold on. Let me mute this guy. All right. Thank you. We met on marketing Twitter. And you'll see that's an interesting place to meet a former CFO on marketing Twitter. And that's because he is the most marketing-driven finance person I've ever met. I didn't think they existed, but I do know now for sure after meeting him. So without any further ado, let me shut up and turn this over to Alistair Thompson. Take it away.
Lovely. Well, thank you. And good afternoon, everybody, or good evening. It is here in the UK at the moment. Lovely to see you all. And it's a real privilege to get to talk to you. I've been fortunate to meet students in all sorts of places all around the world. This is a first for me in the US, though, and a first for Pennsylvania. So that's got to be good. So what I've done for you is I've got a little presentation which I'd like to go through, and to do that I just need to get my screen up. So if you excuse me for a moment, I'm going to look down here and start clicking at stuff. Hopefully a presentation is going to appear. Does that look like a presentation?
Yep, it's showing. It's showing.
Fantastic. Well, the guy on the right is me, admittedly with slightly more flattering lighting than I've got here today, but I think it's close enough. You can work out who I am. And what I was trying to do, talking with Tom about this, is to try and give you tools to talk to your finance teams, you know, the finance teams that you'll be working with in the future when you've finished, you graduate and you go and get a job somewhere. And I've tried to kind of imagine it as a bit of a conversation, you know, it's like you're calling up the finance team. Oh, is that finance? You know, this is the marketing team here. And to give you some ideas of how you can talk about your business and talk about your marketing in a way that is going to resonate as positively as possible with the finance team. So it's more likely they're going to support you. It's more likely they're going to give you the budget that you need. So that's what we're doing. And for some reason, it's not moving on the slide, which is a bit irritating. There we go. So what I'm trying to do this evening, or this afternoon, sorry, I keep getting that wrong, but is to give you a way of focusing on what you're trying to do, give you a way of demonstrating how you're going to make a difference to the business, and give you the tools to persuade finance to back you. Just by way of a bit of background from me, I'm based in the UK. I was born in Glasgow, up in Scotland. Ignore that red dot suggesting that Edinburgh is the most important place in Scotland. It isn't. It's actually Glasgow. But, you know, Edinburgh people don't agree, but they're wrong. I have spent the last 20 years living in Yorkshire, however, which is in the northern part of England. I live in the country really between Middlesbrough and York. Those of you who follow English football might have heard of Middlesbrough as a team in the Championship, which is the second division of English football. And Middlesbrough is a kind of very old economy place, not unlike some parts of Pennsylvania. In fact, it's all, coal mining and shipbuilding and steel making and all those sorts of very traditional types of business. And as you can imagine, it's, economically, that's not been the easiest thing to live through for the last few years. But I've been in Yorkshire 20 years now, and it's a very nice place. Maybe not quite as nice as Glasgow, but it's a very nice place. And by way of background, I've worked in a whole range of different industries, and Tom said in the introduction, I've spent a lot of time in kind of marketing related fields, and that's because a lot of my career, one way or another, has been involved in marketing type businesses. So I've worked for a couple of advertising agencies, for example. I've worked in database marketing. It's a long time ago. It doesn't happen quite as much anymore, but direct mail production, for example, when that was very much the flavor of the moment, as well as in a range of other sectors. And I'm mentioning that because I think it's really important to understand that although the detail is a little bit different, pretty much the principles of finance work everywhere. So what I'm going to tell you this evening is it works if you're in financial services, if you're in printing, if you're in engineering, if you're running a law firm, if you're running a software business. These are principles that will work everywhere. The details will be a bit different. The principles will be exactly the same. And that's where hopefully I'll be able to add a bit of value to your studies. So I said one thing we were going to look at was the outcome. And when I ask marketing people what they're trying to do, what are they trying to achieve, I tend to get kind of answers a bit like this. They want to sell more, they want to make more money, maybe they want to increase the brand value, customer loyalty, all those sorts of things. And of course, none of those are bad things in themselves. They're all perfectly reasonable things to want to do. Some are maybe better than others, but there's a point to them all. The problem is, though, when you take that a stage further forward. So for example, you want to sell more, but what about if your products are unprofitable? Well, all that's going to mean is you're going to lose more money, aren't you? So you want to sell more of products that make you money. You don't want to sell more of products that don't make you money. And I know that might sound a little bit obvious, but if you just concentrate on selling and you forget about the bottom line, it's remarkably easy to sell things that you don't make any money at. And I see that time and time again. In fact, very often when I start working with a new client, the first thing I have to do with them is I have to give them the bad news that one of their favorite projects actually is losing the firm a lot of money. And the best thing they can do is to stop doing that. That's always a bit of a challenge, but inevitably that happened because what they've concentrated on is the selling. They haven't concentrated on the bottom line. Equally, making more money is not a bad idea, but at what cost? If you have to invest a big chunk of cash up front and your return is way off into the future, is that necessarily a good thing for the business? It may be, may not be. Increasing brand value is a common thing. Shareholders don't mind you increasing the brand value, but they can't eat brand value. They can eat with the dividends that you can pay as a result of making a profit. They can sell the shares because they've gone up in value, but in and of itself, the brand value for a shareholder is, well, it's interesting, but it's not something they can do very much with. Improving customer loyalty, I hear a lot. I'm a big believer in customer loyalty, but the truth is that most customers in most businesses actually don't care that much. All that stuff about, we want your supplier of, washing up liquid or something wants you to love them and wants you to, absorb them into your life. It just doesn't happen. People go to the shops to buy some washing up liquid because they want to wash some dishes. That's what it's all about. And one of my favorite ones for marketers particularly is they want sort of name recognition for the business. And that's great. But actually most of the businesses, a few aside, but most of the businesses that everybody knows the name of, generally it's because they've done something really bad. It's because they've polluted, the entire river system, or it's because of a massive fraud that somebody's committed. So just having people know your name, it's great, but you know, the best way to do that is to commit a massive corporate fraud, and that's not something I could recommend to anybody. So all of these things, they're not bad in themselves, but the question is, what's the other side of that equation? You know, what's the other part to that? Because you have to put both those bits together. Sell more, yes, but sell more profitable products. You know, make more money, yes, but make more money without having to invest a lot of money up front. You know, accelerate your cash flow. And there's some of the topics that I won't be dealing with them quite as directly as I am here, but as we go through, hopefully you will see those messages come through in what we're going to discuss. So the one thing, it depends how you have your screen arranged. You may or may not see that bit on the right-hand side there. But basically, as a marketer, or in fact, if you're running a business of any sort, there are 3 ways that you're going to make your business more successful. If you start in the bottom left-hand corner, you're either going to charge people higher prices for what you're selling now, or you're going to get the people who buy from you now to buy more often, so they don't buy once a year, they buy once a month. And the third option is you're going to find some new customers who will come in and bulk up your business. They're really the only 3 ways of building a business. And in reality, you probably want to do a bit of all of those things. You don't really want to just do higher prices or just do frequency. But really, that's what it's all about. So from a marketer's perspective, one of the first challenges that I always set is to try and see if people can articulate which one of these things they're trying to do. You know, you want a budget for something, I get that, but what's the outcome? Which one of these things are you trying to do? And it always makes me really nervous when they say things like, oh, all of them. Because actually the strategies that you would be using to get each one of those is entirely different. Of course, you know, around the edges, there's a bit of a spillover, there's a bit of commonality. But it's really hard to do something that does all of those things. So you really have to focus. And that's why one of my sort of first questions to any marketer is, I get you want the budget. What is it you're trying to do? And I'm expecting an answer really in one of those 3 sections, because there isn't really anything else that's going to be happening. It's easier to say, but you know, if you say to me, well, yes, we're doing this because we're going to increase our prices to our customers, well, that's lovely, but then I've got a few more questions beyond that. And that's where I need, again, from a marketer's point of view, to talk me through how they can answer each of these questions. What is the business model? Do they really understand the impact of marginal costs? Have they thought about the cash flow? I'll explain some of these concepts in a moment. So have they thought about the cash flow? Can they articulate the process? And what evidence do they have for what they're claiming? If you can come and answer all 5 of those things for me, I'm not saying I'm getting the checkbook out and I'm ready to start writing your budget for you, but you're getting really close, because this is the sort of stuff that I'd be wanting to know. So really simple business model. Just to talk you through very quickly, this could be a product, it could be a business, it doesn't really matter, but it's just some simple numbers so that we can track how these things will be different as we work through. So if we've got, you know, revenues of $1,000, for example, direct cost, I'll explain that in a moment, $500. That gives you a gross margin of $500, some overheads of $400, and then your net margin of $100. That's you know, for a manufacturing business, actually, that's not an untypical sort of set of margins there. You know, you're roughly doubling the price of the materials you buy in. You're making maybe a 10% margin on the job. That would be a decent business in any sort of field. If you were a service business, you don't tend to have the direct cost. If you're a law firm or an advertising agency, you don't have so much of the direct costs, but you'll have more costs as overheads. But as a model, we're just going to go with that one for now. And what you'll find is that for your direct cost, there's two kind of important concepts here: fixed cost and variable cost. For your direct cost, these are mostly variable costs. So as you sell more, you will buy more in a roughly equal proportion. So I used to work in the printing industry for quite some time, for example, and roughly speaking, things that we sold for twice the cost of the paper that we bought to print on. That was a well accepted model, and it worked more often than not. Obviously, if we weren't selling anything, we didn't buy any paper. So that's a variable cost. If we sold twice as much, we bought twice as much paper. Yeah, so there's a linear relationship that every time we sold a bit more, we had to buy a bit more, and what we sold, about half the value of what we sold was in paper. It's a variable cost, moved up and down. Overheads, which are fixed costs, in the main, are things like maybe rent on your premises, or utility charges, or I guess nowadays maybe broadband internet access. They're all fixed costs, because actually, even if there's nobody in your office at all, you're still going to get charged rent. If there's nobody there doing a single stroke of work, the landlord will still charge you rent. So that's a fixed cost. It doesn't change from one month to the next. In the long run, of course, everything's a variable cost. You know, you can sell off your factory, you can stop production, you can do all that sort of stuff. But for most practical purposes, you've got this split between your variable costs and your fixed costs. And it's important as a marketer that you know what that split is and how it works. And I'll explain that in just a moment. As a finance person, our main focus is right down the bottom of this. So we're really interested in the net margin in cash terms, if you like. If there are anybody here who's studied any accounting as part of their degree, you'll know that's not strictly cash, but let's just pretend it is for the moment. So how many dollars are you going to make at the end of that month or the end of that year? And what's your net margin? 10% in this case. So we're making a profit of 10% of everything we sell. These are important numbers. And the reason that variable cost and fixed costs are important concepts to wrap your head around is because variable costs, as I said before, they move up and down according to how much you sell. So if you sell twice as much, you'll need to buy twice as much paper. If you sell half as much, you only need half as much paper. Those costs vary in a linear fixed relationship like that. Fixed costs are a bit different because they can go along for quite some time and not change at all. And then they suddenly take a big step up. So imagine your factory gets to the point where it's completely full and you need to buy a new factory. Well, you've got a huge extra cost that comes from nowhere, haven't you, that has to be absorbed into your P&L. Or, you know, maybe your marketing department has 2 or 3 people in it for a long, long time, then you need to get 4 people. Well, the cost of your marketing team has just gone up by a third, hasn't it? And so you see that stepping effect which happens in fixed costs. And that's, as you'll see in a moment, that's a really important thing to understand as a marketer, because there are ways that you can help make more money for the business if you can understand that and articulate it to your finance person. So if we think about our original model, one of the options I said is we could increase the volume of what we're selling. So we don't change anything else about the business. We just, instead of you buying once a month, you're now buying twice a month, something like that. So let's imagine that our revenues went up to $1,400. Well, because of the variable cost element, we know that's 50% of the total, don't we? That was the number that we used before. So if our revenues are $1,400, our direct costs are $700, which gives us a margin of $700, which is great. That's $200 more than it was before, isn't it? Our overheads are fixed costs, you may remember. And if so, they don't change at all. That's still the same $400 that we had at the beginning, which means on our bottom line, we've now got a profit of $300. And instead of a 10% margin, we've now got a 21% margin. So we've got 3 times the amount of cash on the bottom line, from $100 to $300, and 2.1 times the amount of profit margin, from 10% to 21%, just by putting more volume through the business. Does that make sense? Now, there's a bit of an assumption built into this, which is that you've got enough space within your business capacity to produce those extra $400 worth of product. But on the assumption that you have, then that's a great way as a marketer that you can build profit for your business, and you can demonstrate to a finance person or anybody else how you're doing it, because you're able to say, well, we know that our costs are going to go from $500 to $700, but our overhead costs will stay the same, and you'll make an extra $300. Sorry, an extra $200 rather, $100 originally, $300 now. So that's a great way to articulate to a finance person why what you are doing with your marketing to get people to buy more often is going to be a really beneficial thing for the business. However, you can actually do even better than that. And this is, if you can, this is always the win. This is always the one to go for, which is to have higher prices. So you don't produce any more than you're producing now. You just charge more money for it. That's not as hard as you would think, but actually this is where you really do need very clever marketing. Because if you think about the volume side of the equation, let's say you're running a series of ads, online, TV, press, doesn't matter what it is, that generates you $1,000 a month. Well, if you just run a few more ads, you'll probably get to $1,400, no problem at all, because you've got that model working, haven't you? So, you know, if your ads are running, you know, once every 2 months in the New York Times, and you make that once every month, the likelihood is you're going to sell more, even if you don't change anything else in your business. This, however, you've got to think differently about the business. You've got to think differently about the value that you are generating for your customers. Because if you can demonstrate to customers that what you do gives them much greater value, by and large, they'll be happy to pay higher prices for it. So this is where a marketer's expertise can really pay off. Because as you'll see, we don't need any more capacity for this. We're producing the same number of units that we were before. It's just we're selling them for £1,200. Sorry, $1,200. Sorry, I'm trying to translate everything I say into American. I'm sorry. So we get $1,200 of revenues because we're not making any more units. It's only still costing us the same $500 it was in the first example. It's not costing us any more. So now our gross margin is £700, just like it was in the previous extra volume example, except our gross margin, which was 50%, is now up to 58%. Our overhead costs have stayed the same, $400, like they were before. We're not doing anything else. And it's making us also $300 in the bottom line, which is a 25% margin. So the extra volume was 21%. The higher prices is 25%. So good extra cash, and you've also got 2.5 times the net margin that you were making before. And you've done all of that without any more cost. You don't need any more capacity. You don't need to buy anything else. You don't need anybody else, you know, working in your office. You don't need to rent more premises. You don't need to do any of that. So this is a great way to be able to talk about how you as marketers can create a positive impact on the business. Of course, it takes a little bit of thinking about how can you sell for $1,200 the stuff you're selling now for $1,000. I'm not saying that's easy, but I am saying if you crack that code, it's a very, very worthwhile thing to be doing. I mentioned earlier on about cash flow. One thing that you do need to think about when you're talking to a finance person is they go, well, okay, that's great. I get it. You get sell this for $1,200 instead of $1,000. And I understand how that impacts our profit. That's fantastic. But how much do we need to spend up front to get that money back? And broadly speaking, if it looks like this, you're not going to get the project signed off, even though across the life of this project, you're going to make $100,000, which is a 10% return on your original investment, because you're laying out $1 million today and it takes you 5 years to get your money back. And there's probably not a CFO in the world that's going to go for that. So you do need to think about, what do I have to do up front to get the result I want? And build that into your proposal, because it's a question that a finance person will immediately be going to in their head. I like the idea. I understand how we're making money. What do we need to lay out up front to get that result? You also need to be able to talk about your process. And of course, it's more complicated than this in practice, but finance people are process-minded people. It's you know, I've got to be honest, I don't find it the most fascinating thing in the world, but the typical finance person will be thinking about the process because they're used to logical decisions. And, you know, if you add this to that, it comes to this, and, you know, that's how they think. So the more you can talk about what you're doing in this sort of way, you know, we get a lead, we're going to convert however many % of that into a presentation, and then however many % of that presentation we convert into a sale. The more you can talk about that and demonstrate you're tracking the activity, again, the more you are persuading me as a finance person that you know what you're doing, you'll be able to generate those results. So think about that process, and also think about the proof. How do you know that 40% of the people that you do a presentation to are going to buy your product, whatever that is? And there's a distinct hierarchy here, which is the opposite way around to the way that this is normally presented to me as a finance person. So I'm very likely to believe if we got 40% for the last 20 years, we're going to get 40% next year. I'm very likely to believe that. I might believe, well, our competitor who's right next door to us does this and they get a 40% sign up and they supply the same product, the same industry. I'm not going to believe that quite as much, but I'm going to give that a go. Number 3 million in the list of things I believe is, oh, Facebook do this, or Google does this. Again, I'm not saying they're terrible examples, but unless you happen to be running a search engine business or a massive social network, what they do makes absolutely no difference at all. If you're selling steel or making automotives or, you know, running radio stations, none of those things have got anything to do with what those businesses do. So don't come and tell me what Apple does. I'm not interested. I want to know either what we have done or what a business very much like ours has done. Give me that proof so that you can explain it to me and I can understand that those numbers are real. Because I know, and bear in mind, I'm a finance person, I can make my numbers say anything. I change a few numbers in a spreadsheet, I change a formula here and there. I know the numbers just change out of all recognition by the end. And because I know that, I'm expecting that you will also know that. So you'll be coming to me with a proposal that says, oh, look, this is a really worthwhile thing to do because we're going to sign up 40% of the people that we make presentations to. And you'll be playing around with your spreadsheet to make sure that to get a number that generates a profit, because if it doesn't generate a profit, you're not even going to come and talk to me, are you? You know, you're not going to come and say, look, here's a great idea, but it's going to lose us, you know, $1 million a year. I'm going to say, thanks for coming, you know, goodbye, keep walking. So I know that the likelihood is these numbers have got a bit of, they've been experimented with a bit, shall we say. So you've got to prove to me these numbers are solid. And that's a really important part of convincing me to go for whatever it is you're proposing. Even if I like the idea, even if I understand the process, even if the cash flow is right, I'm going to be hunkering right down on this to say, how solid are those numbers? And part of the problem, of course, is that you don't always know all of these numbers. And sometimes it's not possible. But again, the thing that always impresses me with marketers is if they've run some tests, is this just an idea that everyone's got together in a conference room somewhere and come up with some, you know, brainstorm some ideas and thought, that's a great idea, let's go off and do this? Or, you know, have they spent, you know, it costs you $50 to test a headline in Facebook or something, You know, you can run some ads for next to nothing. You can get some results. You can show, oh, this percentage clicked on this and what have you. It's a really, really simple thing to do. And, you know, if you're not spending $50 out the marketing budget to prove your own concept, I'm not sure why the business should be committing $1 million to see if it works. So think about ways that you can test that, which helps to build up. Well, no, I can't tell you we've done this for years because it's a new idea. However, I have tested the new idea and here is the results we got. You know, I've spent a couple $100, but, you know, and obviously we need to do a bit more work as part of the process of fleshing this out, but we got some indications here, we got some early signs, we've got some evidence that we can use to say, we think this is going to work. And as long as we're managing the cash flow element of this properly, so we're not, you know, we're not spending that $1 million up front. We might spend a small amount of it to do a bigger test. We might spend a little bit more to do a proof of concept. We might do a little bit more to do a local promotion. We might do a bit more to do a national promotion. We might want to roll it out. But the great thing is once the ball is running and once you're getting those results, yeah, we got 40% on the Facebook test. Yeah, we still got more or less 40% when we rolled it out to our local community. Yeah, we still got more or less 40% when we rolled it out to maybe a statewide audience. Now we've got, you know, 40% for the entire northeast of the United States. I'm very likely to believe that you'll get 40% if we roll this out nationally. Because what you've done is you've helped, as we've been going along, to give the evidence that I would need to feel comfortable that we've got a really solid case there. And that's the bit that I find is very often, the two bits that are missing often are the process bit and the proof bit. And the more you can home in on those and give, if not a perfect answer, at least an answer that's got evident credibility to it, the more likely I am to believe it, the more likely I am to support it. And that in turn is the bit that unlocks the, you know, the flow of funds that allows you to go off and do those projects. So just as a summary, when you're talking to a finance person in particular, but this is actually true all the time, you should be looking to maximize your bottom line profits. That's your ultimate goal. And okay, you might only be in charge of, you know, digital marketing or social media for a company or something like that. You might say, well, look, how can I do that? I'm only one little cog in this really big organization. Well, the answer is if you can think through how what you're doing has that impact on the bottom line, you've got a much more persuasive case to support whatever it is you're going to do. So even though you're maybe thinking, well, look, I'm making a tiny difference on a kind of multi-million-dollar bottom line, that doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter to me as a finance person because I'm going to want to back every good case I come across where I'm confident about the cash flow and I'm confident that the results you're telling me I'm going to get are results I'm actually going to get. And you've got the evidence to back that up. So always think in those terms. Of course, for your own discipline, you will be thinking about things like, you know, how much engagement am I getting on this social media post? You'll be thinking about, you know, how many people do I have on my mailing list? You'll be thinking about all those other things as well, as you should. But when you're coming to talk to the finance person, if you don't have a story about how this gets to your bottom line profits, then you're probably missing the big sell. The next thing is know your business model. How do your fixed and variable costs work? And be careful about your production capacity, because a lot of businesses actually have capacity they're not using now, which is essentially free because everybody's still getting paid, all your costs are being covered. And it's a great way, I often say to people, to think about using that for promotions. So if your factory is running at 80% capacity, well, with the 20% you're not using, why wouldn't you make some special offers? Why wouldn't you use that to give people, you know, buy one, get one free or something like that? Because you wouldn't be doing anything with the space anyway, because you don't have customer orders to do it. So think about your production capacity and factor that in. If what you're proposing is going to mean the business is to increase its fixed cost, you know, we need an extra 3 people in the marketing department to make this work. Well, you've got to think about that in as an extra fixed cost for the business and be able to explain why that is still going to make more money in the bottom line when you've done it than you're making just now. When do we get our money back is the key question. You know, you want 100 grand from me, okay. Do I get 200 grand back by the end of the financial year? If you can tell me that, and then the next point, if you can show me how I'm going to get that happening, and then give me the evidence so that I know it's based on solid, ideally fact. I'll take good research as a kind of second substitute for that. If you can do all of those things, then I'm very likely to back your product. But bear in mind, the top tip, inexpensive testing is underused in my experience by marketers. You know, everybody wants to pitch for the £500,000 project and nobody's prepared to commit $50 out their own marketing budget to test a headline. You know, I'm thinking, well, I'm not really going to, you know, if you think it's such a sure thing, why wouldn't you spend your own $50 first? Why are you coming to me for $500,000? So test, do it as much as you can, because that gives you evidence in areas that you haven't worked in historically, or in different ways of selling or different approaches to the market. You're trying to create a higher price for your existing product, for example. You can do lots of testing around that to come to me with some good evidence. So that was pretty much all I was going to say by way of sort of pushing information out, as it were. I'm very happy to take some questions. As Tom said earlier on, you can find me on Twitter if you want to. I spend too much time there, but that's where you will find me if you do. And I'm very often pitching in to tell marketers how to talk to their finance team, because I think it's an area that some people need more help on than others.
Awesome.
So thank you very much. If I stop the
stop sharing the screen, then we get everybody's face on the camera. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right. Well, I got a few things that I'm going to have some comments, maybe some questions before the rest of my students. You guys be thinking about a question you might have. One of the problems, a lot of marketers, I know this issue, they think low price is going to win. Hey, we make a little margin, but we sell a lot of them. Doesn't that not work very often, Alistair? You're better off going for the high price than the low price.
My instinct, without exception, is always to try for a high price first. Always, always, always. And there's a couple of reasons for doing that. One is, as you can see, mathematically, it's just the more sensible way to do it anyway, from the example I showed you. So for no more work, you get an extra $200. But also, when you start sort of cutting back, then it's a bit of a race to the bottom. I had a very wise boss many years ago who I remember, who told me that no business ever shrunk their way to greatness. And that's always stayed with me. You know, you have to, when you start kind of going, well, you know, all right, well, if we cut our prices, but then we'll have to get rid of a few people in the office so that we can keep our profits going. And then so nobody answers the phone anymore. So customers go somewhere else. So we have to reduce our prices more so that people will still buy from us. And you're just in a bit of a death spiral. So unless there is some major technological change that allows you to, you know, what we used to sell for $1,000, we can now sell for $500 because this new technology works in a different way. That's okay. But if you're just saying, oh, we're just going to, you know, slice away at the price rather, that we sell at, then you've inevitably got to slash away at the costs of running your business. And there comes a point when that just becomes unsustainable. And you actually end up shooting yourself in the foot because, you know, you fall down on service, you fall down on quality, you fall down in the support that you give your customers, and sooner or later they go elsewhere, or at best, all they do is they just ask 10 people for some prices and they just buy from the cheapest because everybody looks the same.
Right, commodities.
And that to me, it's complete madness. So high price, but demonstrate lots of value and be different from everybody else is the best way to do it. The more you look like everybody else, the more you slash your prices to compete purely on price, you're in a race to the bottom. And as I think it was Seth Godin said, that's not a race you want to win.
Definitely. Now, have you been burned by marketers in the past? Because you did share some awesome advice. Marketers, I'm going to get these slides. I'll push them out to you because I want you to take them with you. This will help you when you are working professionally, because this will be a battle wherever you go. I'm going to ask Alistair to answer the question. I know that many finance officers have been burned by marketers making promises that never showed up. Alistair, have you had that experience?
Well, not directly, but that's mainly because I've always been more interested in that marketing side of the business. But I've seen it happen a lot. And you also have to bear in mind your average finance person. If I said they were a little bit skeptical, I would be dramatically understating how skeptical they are. Finance people believe nobody about anything. I mean, that's the blood that runs through our veins, is skepticism and cynicism. And of course, there's a place for that, and it's actually quite good. If you've got someone who says, well, I really want to go off and do this, and you've got somebody else saying, you need to convince me, show me you're working, show me your homework, demonstrate how that's going to happen. You'll probably end up with a better result if you do that.
Most definitely.
But yeah, there's definitely this thing where, our resting position is we don't believe you, and you have to get us to believe you. You have to sell it to us as much as you are trying to sell whatever it is your business produces to the outside world.
All right, and this is a point for all of you to take with you. When you are a marketer and you have a budget, always include some percentage of that for testing. Alistair brought up a good point. You should always be running these tests. That is a great takeaway from here. Little tests. The CFO is not going to give you $1 million to try something you haven't even tested with anything on your budget in your department. All right, so I'm going to shut up. Who has a question? Let's open this up to anybody that has a question. Just unmute yourself or put it in the chat box. I don't want to shut this down without giving you an opportunity to ask anything about you as a marketer with a relationship with finance or any of the things that we covered. And certainly you should be having, the simulation report to corporate headquarters is coming in, and that ties to your financial performance, which is really one of the reasons why that simulation is so valuable in my mind, is because you start seeing as a marketer why that is so important. The balanced financial scorecard is a great way to show what you're doing is working with what your company's trying to accomplish. So any questions out there? Everybody was quiet yesterday. It seems like we got another case of quiet.
I have a question.
Oh, good. Fire away.
I think, well, when you said about the simulation, that kind of gave me a question to ask. So do you think it's really smart to put an excessive amount of funds in R&D investments? I had a problem with that throughout the simulation, that I was investing a lot, but do you think that there's ever a case where you are investing too much that it can actually hurt you?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm very keen on research and on developing ideas and trying to do it fairly organically. So I'd always be looking to start as small as possible and then take little steps that kind of build up. And I suppose it's a little bit like an example of what I was talking about in the presentation there. If you're able to explain to me about the process, and you're basically each stage you're consolidating what you learned before, you're demonstrating that an idea that worked on a small scale is going to work on a bigger scale, then that's always worthwhile. But I think for me, it's always about take it step by step. So, you might end up spending $1 million in research, but that's probably not your starting point. Your starting point is, well, we're going to spend, $50, and then we're going to spend 100, and then we're going to spend 1,000, and then we're going to spend 2,000, then we're going to spend 5,000, then we're going to spend 10,000, and you build up, because basically at each stage you're giving the opportunity to say, do we want to do more of this? Because what happens if you get to $10,000 and you find that what works on a small scale doesn't work on a big scale? Because that happens sometimes, doesn't it? You know,
Yeah.
there's some things that are great in your town, in your community, but they don't work beyond that for reasons nobody understands. So we want to try and find that out early and find it out with as little risk as possible and as little financial outlay as possible. And actually your finance person will respect you for doing it, because that will demonstrate that you're thinking about all the things that we spoke about in the presentation. You're thinking about your process, you're thinking about being able to prove your results, you're thinking about your cash flow, you're thinking about making a compelling case. And actually, if you get to the point where you spent $10,000 and maybe it hasn't worked, a lot of people would see that's a bad thing. Actually, from a finance point of view, we'd say that's a really good thing, because what she's done there is she's done some sensible research, she's rolled it out in a structured way, and has avoided getting carried away with the idea, because she's realized at the $10,000 level, it's not going to work beyond that. And we've canned the project. Actually, that's good. I would be more inclined to believe you next time you came to me with a proposal after doing that, even if it didn't work, than if you just approached me cold and we hadn't had that situation before. So that's the way I would do it. And I think for most finance people, again, we are skeptical as a breed, so take that on board. But I think most finance people would be much more inclined to believe someone who could talk in that way about their project and about the research they were looking to put in place for it.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Let's take one more question. Come on now, somebody. Alistair, they're usually not so quiet and bashful. It's getting worse. I think senioritis is really setting in. Next week is actually we're 2 weeks away from this semester ending and finals starting. So I know everyone is dragging now, although it's winter weather has arrived, but it's supposed to be spring. Yeah. One last question, or anybody?
If there's no questions, shall I just mention something which always struck me from sort of earlier in my career? I mentioned that I used to work in a business reduced direct mail. These were mainly things like catalogs for mail order retailers before all that sort of stuff went online. And I worked for many of the big businesses in the UK who do that sort of thing. And it was really interesting. So they would mail maybe 1 million catalogs a month. But what they would do is they'd actually have that split into what they called cells, but it's like customer segmentation, really. And they'd always be trying stuff. So they'd have the main bulk of the mailing. So maybe 800,000 out of that million would just be all the same. It would go out to everybody. But they'd have, 1,000 would be a test for something. There'd be a couple of thousand a test for someone else. There'd be a 5,000 that was maybe a rerun on a bigger scale of the 1,000 tests from a couple of months ago because the results were looking good. And they were always trying to sensibly test in a fairly low risk way, because if you send out 1,000 as part of 1 million mailing and the 1,000 bombs completely, no one's going to notice. But if it just turns out that it's a brilliant idea and people are buying off that like crazy, well, you want to do more of that, don't you? So you scale up the stuff that's working, which is exactly what they used to do. So 1,000 to 2,000 to 5,000 to 10,000, 100,000 major run. And if it doesn't work, well, you just don't do it again. And I think that for me was a really good discipline. And they were really good at this, because that's how mail order retailers made money. They were really, really good at this. They were always testing, they were always trying things out, took very low risk. And bear in mind in those days, because this was physical catalogs being mailed, it cost them money to test. Nowadays, you can do for $50 on Facebook what it used to cost them, maybe £10,000 to actually physically print and send out in the mail. You can do for nothing. But that was a really powerful idea, and it was actually the secret of their success. They were always testing small, low-risk tests, and then scale up stuff that worked and scale down stuff that doesn't work. So if their test is pulling at, say, 10% purchase rate, and the main list is at 5% purchase rate, well, they're going to do more and more and more of those tests. And if they're still getting 10%, eventually what they do now for the main list drops off completely. And then they start the process again with something else and they try and scale that up. So always be testing is possibly the best bit of advice I could ever give you, because it gives you so much data that you can use to talk to not just your finance team, but you can talk to everybody around the business about, and you can show them that it's based on really solid research. You can show them the numbers, you can show them what happened, and all of that really helps when it comes to trying to get them to green light whatever project you're trying to do next.
That is gold, and take that tip with you. Like I said, I'll send you out these slides. I want you to take those with you as well. Thank you so much, Alistair, for sharing with my class. All our students are going to say thanks, but it is a tradition that we try to take every time. Get the thumbs up picture here. All right, everybody, I want you to get the thumbs up picture. We got to get the souvenir photo with the thumbs up photo. Come on, everybody, get your thumbs up. I want to see the thumbs up on this. Come on now. That's it. Come on. Yeah. Thumbs. Thank you. All right. Again, Alistair, that was solid gold. Thank you so much. Students, have a great rest of the day. And I want all of you to thank Alistair on your way out of here. I will share these slides. It has his Twitter handle. Follow him on Twitter. He's the greatest financial mind that loves marketing of anybody that I've ever met. So you'll get a lot of good information by following him. Again, thank you, Alistair. Buy his books, Cash Flow Surge, Business Plan, and you'll be better at marketing for those two things as well. Anyway, have a great night. Thanks so much, Alistair.
Well,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Bye.